Welcome to the Liberty Reports training series. In today's video, we'll be discussing the DBAvg function included with the Liberty Reports software. The DBAvg function for Liberty Reports returns an average value from a column in a table. The rows that are included in the average can be limited by applying a filter. In our example today, we'll be starting with a driving query that pulls a list of AP vendors. We'll then add the DBAvg function for each row and provide the average invoice amount for each vendor. The easiest way to use one of the Liberty Reports functions is to select the cell in which you wish the returned value to be displayed. Then select the Function Wizard button located in the Liberty Reports ribbon. Doing so brings up a list of our most commonly used Liberty Reports functions. If we select a specific function like DBAvg, we're presented with a description of the purpose of the function as well as the proper syntax of how the formula will appear upon completion of the wizard. Once we've selected the DBAvg function and click Next, we are presented with a list of the available database tables for our existing connection. In this example, we're connecting to a Sage 100 contractor database, and since we are wanting to get the average invoice amount for each AP vendor, we will select AP Invoice and click Next. We're now presented with a list of columns for the AP Invoice table. Since we want the average invoice amount, we will select Invoice Total and click Next. We're then prompted to create conditions that can be used to filter the result based on the information provided by our driving query. We'll click Add Condition, and in this example, we'll filter our function results based on the vendor ID provided by the query. To do so, we will select Vendor from our column list, select the equal comparison operator, and for the compare to value type, we could use a literal value and select a valid option using the value drop-down menu, or we could use a database field value type and select the desired column name. But for the purposes of this example, it will be best to use a cell reference. In this manner, we can use the same function for each row in the driving query. Once we've selected cell reference as our value type, we can use the Cell Selector tool to select the first vendor ID listed in our driving query and click OK. Clicking Next brings us to the final stage of the function wizard, which provides options for the column layout. Namely, should the columns display left to right or top to bottom, whether or not to include column captions, which would insert the column name along with our function results, and the option to fill formulas down should the function be inserted adjacent to an existing query or function. Since we are only returning one value in our example, we'll leave the layout set to left to right, and we do not wish to include the column captions as we've already created a column header. We do want this function to populate for the entire query, so we'll leave the option to fill down formulas selected. Once we're done with our changes and we click Finish, we are presented with an average invoice amount for each vendor. Notice that since we left the Fill Down Formulas option selected, our resulting function has automatically populated for each query result. Were we to refresh the query and a different result set was returned, the adjacent function would automatically update with the new results. This concludes this segment of the Liberty Reports training series on the DBAvg function. Thanks for watching. We hope you found the information useful.